We do this every month, partially for our local community here, but we actually record and put it online and share this with lots of different educators, families, churches around the United States and even a little bit around the world. So we're really grateful for you guys to come. And tonight is a new format that we are trying out, and I think is going to be really neat. Mr. Mueller, our Dean of Upper School, is going to give us a lecture on discussion, and then we're going to do it. And something that we're always telling our faculty is that we push our students really hard to not consider themselves math people or art people or music people, but to be people who participate in all those things because they're all good. And so that means that as faculty, we have to do the same. And I think as parents, we have to do the same and be willing to put ourselves out a little bit and challenge maybe some of the things that we're not as good at. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So I've been telling our math teachers, like, can you do like a math night? Because that's really where I need some practice. But Mr. Mueller is going to be giving you a lecture tonight that he gave the faculty last week as we're preparing for the year. It is one of the best lectures on discussion I've ever heard. And so I'm really grateful that, sorry, John. It's true though.
Chain line.
And I'm really grateful that he's going to share it with you tonight.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Gilbert. As if I didn't already feel enough pressure, the expansion of my own hypocrisy weighing down on me as I give a lecture about discussion. Just a little bit worrisome. What I want to do is offer you some thoughts tonight about why it is that we have prized discussion so highly at this school, why we place such an emphasis on it, and what we think is going on when our students discuss. I've often heard folks kind of think, oh yeah, you get together and kind of chat so everyone can share their opinion and kind of prove that everyone's opinion is equally valid, right? Like, no. But if that makes you send your child to us, no. We think far more is going on. Not to discount the opinion that I just portrayed, but we think far more is going on. And so I want to give you a little picture of that tonight, and then hopefully set us off to a good discussion that I think will be one of the experiences that will do far more for you than just hearing from me can. But I'd like to offer some context first. Midway through the dialogue Phaedo by Plato, which maybe we will have a discussion on that at some day in the future, Socrates makes a claim that I think should strike you as odd at first. He has been unjustly convicted of impiety, he's been disrespectful to the gods, and of corrupting the young men of Athens, and will shortly be compelled to drink hemlock and so be put to death. And at a crucial moment in the dialogue, when his young followers, his disciples, are in danger of losing all hope, this is a dialogue about the possibility of the immortality of the soul, something really not taken for granted. Remember, this is 4th century BC Athens. And they're having a discussion about, is this possible? Can this be something we can place our hope in? Does the soul live on after death? And it's at a moment in the dialogue when his followers seem to think, like, no, this is not a sound, trustworthy argument. We can't really believe this. Socrates says that they must avoid the greatest evil that can befall a human, misology, which is the hatred of the logos, or put another way, the hatred of reasonable discussion. And he says this: there is no greater evil one can suffer than to hate reasonable discourse. Misology and misanthropy, the hatred of mankind, arise in the same way. Misanthropy comes when a man without knowledge or skill has placed great trust in someone and believes him to be altogether truthful, sound, and trustworthy, and then a short time afterward finds him out to be wicked and unreliable. And then this happens in another case when one has frequently had that experience, especially with those whom one believed to be one's closest friends. Then in the end, after many hardships and blows, one comes to hate all men and believe that no one is sound in any way at all. Have you not seen this happen? Socrates asks his followers. And I think Plato is also asking you at that moment, have you not seen this happen? Have you not seen people who trusted someone, some leader, some politician, some public figure, and found them to be a liar, and subsequently started to mistrust everyone? Likewise, have you not seen people who had a close friend, someone who they trusted with every secret in their heart, only to have that person betray them? Now, in each case, one person has done the betraying or the letting down, but it's so great, this betrayal, this letting down, that it causes the person to mistrust all men, all humans. And I think we have seen this kind of misanthropy arise in others, and if we are honest, we recognize the sentiment in ourselves all too often. And surely misanthropy is a great evil, one that can keep us from seeing the image and likeness of God in those around us. But remember that Socrates began by saying that misology, the hatred of dialogue, is the greatest evil that can befall a man. Not misanthropy. He gives you the misanthropy thing so that you kind of can be tracking with what sort of thing he's talking about. But misanthropy is not the greatest evil, according to Socrates. It's misology. How can this be? He goes on to say, the similarity between misology and misanthropy lies in this. It is when one who lacks skill in argument puts his trust in arguments as being true, and then shortly afterwards believes it to be false, as sometimes it is and sometimes it is not. And so with another argument and then another. You know how in those in particular who spend their time studying contradiction in the end believe themselves to have become very wise, and that they alone have understood that there is no soundness or reliability in any object or argument, but that all that exists simply fluctuates up and down as if it were in the Euripus. That's a narrow strait that is marked by really fluctuating waves and strong winds. It seems that everything all around you is in Euripus and does not remain in the same place for any time at all. He goes on to say, it would be pitiable, Phaedo, when there is a true and reliable argument and one that can be understood, if a man who has dealt with such arguments as appear at one time, and at another time untrue, should not blame himself or his own lack of skill, but because of his distress, in the end gladly shift the blame away from himself to the arguments, to the logos, and spend the rest of his life hating and reviling reasonable discussion, and so be deprived of truth and the knowledge of reality. It is still perhaps a little unclear why misology should be worse than misanthropy, let alone the very worst evil that can befall a man. Perhaps being eaten by a grizzly bear is worse. But let's take a moment to consider what it is for the framework that Socrates is building. When I hear Socrates' description of misology, I am immediately reminded of the general state of cultural discourse that we find ourselves in today. The public training ground for all of our students, by the way, your children. A climate marked by jargon, slurs, polarizing rhetoric, and sweeping condemnations is truly the breeding ground for misology, if there ever was one. Add to all that this vicious noise is more present in our daily lives because of social media, and things look really bleak indeed. Cultural analysis, by the way, easily falls into one of two errors. We can believe on one hand that you live in the very best of all possible times. Or you can fall into the other error of believing that you must live in the very worst of all possible times, right? And these are kind of the classic, like, progressive and conservative stances. One, we are carrying the torch of enlightenment into the future, and this is the best it's ever been. We can make it even better, but this is definitely the best. And then, the conservative, these are stereotypes that I'm working with, like, oh, this is the worst it's ever been, if only we could go back to the Middle Ages. Like, the likelihood, if you're a student of history, of either of those things being true is just very minimal. Whatever the virtues or vices of a particular time, neither of those judgments is likely to be true, given the scope of human history. And yet, each time does have its own vice and its own virtue. And I can't help but believe that we find ourselves in a cultural environment that makes misology in particular more likely and more prevalent than any other I can think of as a student of history. At what time has reasonable discourse been more openly reviled and misaligned? I don't really know. I know of other contentious times. I don't know when it has been worse. And if Socrates is right, that puts us, and therefore our students, in great danger of what he calls the greatest calamity that can befall a human. Surely all of this is unpleasant. But what is the danger? Why is misology so terrible? Notice that Socrates is not chiefly concerned with unpleasant disagreements, libel, party politics. There certainly was all of that in ancient Athens, if you read Thucydides. Listen again what he's worried about. It would be pitiable, Phaedo, when there is a true and reliable argument, and one that can be understood, if a man who has dealt with such arguments as appear at one time true and another time untrue, should not blame himself or his own lack of skill, but because of his distress, in the end gladly shift the blame away from himself to the arguments, and spend the rest of his life hating and reviling reasonable discussion, and so be deprived of truth and the knowledge of reality. If you're listening closely, you'll notice that Socrates embeds three huge claims in this last sentence. The first is that real truth exists. Second is that it is knowable by humans, and that the way we come to know it is through discussion. Those three claims are part of the heart of what we do at this school. And if they don't sound very groundbreaking to you, trust me, the school is full of students who have been raised in a cultural context where none of these can be safely assumed. If your students are raised in a Christian home, they might believe that real truth exists. They might believe that it's knowable by humans, but our experience as educators for the last 6 or 7 years, those of us who helped start the school, shows us that even in Christian homes, this absolutely cannot be taken for granted. If you ask a student, does real truth exist? They might really say something like, well, like your truth can exist, and my truth can exist, but your truth doesn't have to be my truth. That is an argument that they are welcome to advance. That is absolutely not what Socrates is advocating for when he says that the logos is the thing that will connect us to truth. I'm now going to do something that in the scholarly world is really unforgivable and hop around to a few different dialogues and a few different books, actually, to follow this line of thinking on the logos, on discussion, and a connection with real truth, with real knowledge of reality. In the dialogue Timaeus, also by Plato, the titular character invites us to conceive of all that is, everything in the cosmos, with the following questions. We must begin by making the following distinction. What is that which always is and has no becoming, and that which comes to be but never truly is? The former is grasped by understanding, which involves a reasoned account. It is unchanging. The latter is grasped by opinion, which involves unreasoning sense perception. It comes to be and passes away, but never truly is. Timaeus makes a key distinction here. There are things in the cosmos that are really real. So real that this world, everything we see in this room around us, is but a shadow in comparison. Whatever it is unchanging, eternal, and we can only access it through understanding involving a reasoned account, the logos, the dialectic in pursuit of truth. On the other, the things all around us, the earth, our bodies, Twitter, that come to be and pass away. They exist-ish, but not the way eternal things exist. And we easily access them with unreasoned sense perception. Our sense perception is all right as far as it goes. The problem is it just really doesn't go very far, though we trust it implicitly most of the time. It is itself one of those things that comes to be and passes away, which just makes its existential status questionable, right? Truth, real truth is out there and could save us from this mess. But none of the faculties that we most easily rely on, the ones that come most easily to us, are fit to apprehend it. All of our senses, smell, taste, touch, sight, tell us that the world around us is as real as it gets. And that is what we typically mean when we use that ridiculous phrase, real life. Timaeus hints at it here, and Plato argues at length elsewhere, that we do have one faculty that can apprehend what really is, that we can come to know the truth as it really is. The trouble is that this faculty is initially weak, it's hidden, and it's inclined to all the wrong things and therefore easily misled. This faculty exists in the human soul and is an instrument, Plato says, Socrates says in the Republic, more important to save than 10,000 eyes. For by it alone is truth seen. This part of you is real and vitally precious, but it is turned in the wrong direction. It naturally focuses on that which comes to be, but never truly is, rather than that which is and has no shadow of becoming, the true, the good, the beautiful. And this is where the dialectic, the dialogue, comes in. Discussion in pursuit of truth turns and moves the pursuit of the soul towards the very real, but as yet unknown truth. And this informs the picture of education that Socrates presents in Book 7 of the Republic after the analogy of the cave. He says, "And if this is true, we must hold the following about these things. Education is not what the professions of certain men assert it to be. They presumably assert that they put knowledge into the soul that wasn't previously there, as though they were putting sight into blind eyes. But the present argument, on the other hand, indicates that the power is in the soul of each, and that the instrument through which it learns, just as an eye is not able to turn toward the light from the dark without the whole body, must be turned around from that which is in becoming with the whole soul until it is able to endure looking at that which is. And not only that, the brightest part of that which is. There would, therefore, be an art of this turning around, concerned with the way in which this power can be most easily and efficiently turned, not an art of producing sight. Rather, this art takes it as a given that that sight is there already, but it is not rightly turned, nor looking at what it ought to look at, and accomplishes this object. What is the dialectic, dialogue, discussion, no matter the subject or grade level of your student at this school? It is this art of turning the soul toward that which is. Participation in the Logos with other incarnate image bearers. If that sounds grandiose, or as if I'm saying that we walk into every classroom and ask, "Hey kids, what is that which always is and never comes to be?" Perhaps I can help you think of it differently. In all of our various disciplines, By the way, we do absolutely do that sometimes. My former student in the rogue is like, yeah. But not every time. In all of our various disciplines, we should be pursuing the good, the true, the beautiful, that which is. And the way that we model this pursuit, the way you as parents model this pursuit, matters immensely. Because our students will either learn from us that these things are worthwhile and that they exist, that they are knowable by us, or they will believe, even perhaps unconsciously, that there's no way to progress in knowledge of these things because that would just be your opinion, and that everything comes down to this personal and changeable opinion. So it isn't worth their time anyway, or at least not real investment. Chesterton's principle that there are no uninteresting subjects but only uninterested people is resonant here. Just as students are learning either to love or hate people in our classes or in your homes, they are learning either to love the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty, that which is, or they are learning to hate the logos because it seems unreliable and inconsistent to them. Socrates says, we should not allow into our minds the conviction that argumentation has nothing sound about it. Much rather, we should believe that it is we who are not yet sound, and that we must take courage and be eager to obtain soundness, you and the others for the sake of your whole life, and I for the sake of death itself. Remember, when Socrates says these words, he is about to die, and he considers it of vital importance to sit in discussion with his followers so that they don't lose heart and start to mistrust the logos. If all of this seems too Platonic, I want to meditate briefly on the term logos, especially as it applies to us as a classical Christian school. I'm not going to apologize for all of the Plato. I just want to demonstrate to you that there is quite a barrage of other sources working for us here. We've been thinking about the logos chiefly in the way that it's used in the Platonic dialogues, and I want to suggest that that is a middle stage in the development of how logos is understood and used in the West. Many years before Plato, as our president, Dr. Reynolds, has noted in his book, When Athens Met Jerusalem, Heraclitus was the first to use this common Greek term for word. Logos just means word, or at least it used to just mean word. Heraclitus is the first one to use it in a technical or philosophical manner. It's safest to say that the logos was this divine idea that held the universe together. In a cosmos of change, the logos gave order, pattern, and form to nature. Put another way, all things hold together, cohere, and consist in the order and reason of the divine logos. Plato uses the term in a different way than Heraclitus, but one that for our purposes this evening, we should be considering harmonious. While retaining the literal meaning of word, Plato builds on this Heraclitean notion of a divine cosmic coherence by empowering the individual to participate with the logos through dialogue, through the dialectic, through reasonable discussion. I am giving you the fastest of drive-bys here, so bear with me. The apostle St. John picked up this very identifiable thread of Greek philosophy and found it to be so deeply true that logos is the term that he uses to begin his description of the second person of the Trinity. So essential is Christ in the very fabric of the cosmos that St. John finds that the best word to use to describe is logos, word. This is John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The link here between Greek philosophy and the Christian gospel has been observed for millennia amongst such early Christians as St. Justin Martyr, who wrote this: "For not only the Greeks through Socrates were these things revealed by reason, logos, but also among the barbarians were they revealed by logos personally, when he had taken shape and had become a man and was called Jesus." He goes on, "We have been taught that Christ is the firstborn of God, and we have suggested above that he is the logos, of whom every race of men and women were partakers. And they who lived with the logos are Christians, even though they have been thought to be atheists, as among the Greeks Socrates and Heraclitus, and people like them." Whether or not you think that Socrates and Heraclitus could be considered Christians is for a different time. It's a little immaterial here. St. Justin Martyr draws so much attention to their understanding of the term logos. He points to the Apostle John and says this is why St. John uses this word, logos, as a continuation, an intentional way of describing the second person of the Trinity, in whom all things consist. Not only is Jesus the Word, according to St. John and St. Justin Martyr, it is important to note, to bring us back around to discussion, that he tends to teach dialectically. You should compile a list of questions that Jesus asks sometime. I think it would be really illuminating. But to consider one example, we'll look at the Gospel of St. Matthew. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do you say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." This is the divine Logos in dialogue with his image bearers, the incarnate Word in conversation. And he is showing his followers that it matters to him what they think and what they say about him, not for his sake, but for theirs. He asks the question not for his own sake, not to make himself feel better. He knows who he is far better than they do, but for Peter's sake. Peter is able to answer in a way that defines the church, because the true teacher asked him a real question, and his soul was turned toward that which is. So how do we do this well? We need to ask good, true, real questions of our students. Ones that will direct them, not to the answers that we have prepared for them, but to that which is. Good questions are crucial because they have the ability to indicate something real to us, even while making it clear that we do not yet know. We do not have an answer. They draw attention to what we need to know internally, to be persuaded internally by a truth that is external to us, but not external in a way that is ultimately inaccessible. External in a way that is something we can communicate with, something that we can participate with, something that we can share with, being made in the image and likeness of God. One of the most important teachers who taught many of the people who work here said this: "A good question is worth 10,000 words." And for those of us who knew Dr. Al-Geyer, he did not exaggerate, nor was he prone to empty rhetoric. a good question is worth 10,000 words. Why do we call it a good question? It is a question that is well suited to an answer. It has somehow already divined the answer in a way that helps us move forward. We need a good question to start. But what do we do once we get started? We need to keep asking good questions. I'm now going to switch a little bit to some short advice about how to have a good discussion in a very practical way. All the Play-Doh is over. But in preparation for our discussion, which I think we're going to do one group.
Yeah, there's 15 of us.
Perfect. And Mr. Yee is going to lead us in discussion. So I have some suggestions for you. And I'm going to borrow some language from a friend and fellow alum of the Torrey Honors Institute, Peter David Gross. He defines discussion this way. Discussion is two or more people seeking a single unknown truth together. There's more to say about discussion, but I don't think I've ever read a more concise, better definition of discussion. Let's think about it just for a minute. Two or more people. You cannot have a discussion with yourself. When I say that to especially my junior hires, I immediately get a bunch of hands. Like, yes, I can. I can think of other points of view. I don't know about you, Mr. Mueller. But yeah, they're still coming from you, right? There's something a little bit scary about the power that another person has in discussion. This is why I think we hate to be proven wrong. There's something a little bit scary about the authority that another person can carry when they are criticizing our argument. We feel very vulnerable. But it is very difficult, I would say impossible, to move forward without other image bearers, without other people in community, in discussion, in discussion with you. They will bring things to the discussion that you couldn't possibly, and you will do the same, but you need one another. Two or more people seeking. I like this word because it shows, just by the kind of word that it is, that we are looking for that which we do not have. You do not seek something that you believe you already possess. You seek something that you do not have, but know that you need. Seeking a single, talk about one thing, not about many things. Seeking a single, or at least one thing at a time, unknown truth. So this is something that can be interesting as a teacher of great books because, I don't know, Mr. Yee, how many hours of Republic discussion do you think you have sat in at this point?
Man, I don't know.
Okay, how many years have